Hello and welcome to Mr. Alvarez's virtual chemistry laboratory. Today we'll be covering the chemical bonding lab. Introduction. Chemical compounds are combinations of atoms held together by chemical bonds. These chemical bonds are of two basic types, ionic and covalent. Ionic bonds result when one or more electrons from one atom or group of atoms is transferred to another atom. Positive and negative ions are created through the transfer. In a covalent compound, no electrons are transferred. Instead, electrons are shared by the bonded atoms. The physical properties of a substance, such as melting point, solubility, and conductivity, can be used to predict the types of bonds that binds the atoms of the compound. In this experiment, you will test 6 compounds to observe these properties. Your compiled data will enable you to classify these substances as either ionic or covalent compounds. So what we have is 6 substances. We have sucrose, lactose, starch, soluble starch, calcium chloride, potassium chloride, and copper 2 chloride. We have a hot plate. We have a conductivity tester, which is a light bulb with 2 electrodes, and this is plugged into the electrical outlet. Aluminum foil, 6 clean beakers, and 6 scupulas. So procedure, step 1, obtain a weigh boat with 1 gram of each of these substances. Keep organized. Briefly describe each of the substance, color, texture, size of particles, odor. Grab a few small beakers and add about 50 to 100 milliliters of water to each, depending. Take roughly half of all of your solid samples and dump them separately into a beaker. Once you place the solid in water, stir a bit, and then go test the mixture if the mixture conducts. Fold aluminum foil so it fits nicely on top of your hot plate. Turn on your hot plate. Place all of your remaining samples on the foil in separate piles and heat for a few minutes. Then let the foil cool down and throw all the contents in the garbage. So we're going to do things in a little bit of a different order. We're going to set up the hot plate first, and we'll let that go while we work through all of the other different properties. So I'm going to turn the hot plate all the way up, and we're going to make little foil boats to put on top of the hot plate. So rip off a piece of foil. And curl up the edges. One. Two. Three. And another 3. And 3. So we'll take 1 scoop of each. Sucrose first. One scoop of sucrose. Lactose second, 1 scoop of lactose. And 1 scoop of soluble starch. And we'll do the same thing on the other side. 1 scoop of calcium chloride. 1 scoop of potassium chloride. And 1 scoop of copper 2 chloride. So next we're going to see if they dissolve in water. So we will put a little water in each of the beakers. Okay, it's roughly about 50 milliliters of water in each. So we'll start with the sucrose. Take a scoop. Try to stir. Leave that on the side. We'll come back to it in a little bit. Next, we'll try the lactose. Stir. Let it settle. We'll come back to it in a little bit. And the starch. Stir. And we'll come back to that one in a little bit as well. Go to the other side. Start with calcium chloride. Stir. And put it to the side. Potassium chloride. Stir. And last but not least, the copper 2 chloride. Take a scoop. And stir. So I'll do a close-up of if they dissolved or not in a second. But first, while we're here, we'll take the conductivity tester and we'll test if they conduct electricity in water. So we have the first one. We have our sucrose. If the light bulb goes on, it does conduct electricity. If the light bulb does not go on, it does not conduct electricity. So we place the light bulb into the solution. The light bulb is off. The sucrose does not conduct electricity. Does not conduct. Next is the lactose. Same procedure. We take the light bulb. We place the electrodes in solution. The light bulb remains off. The lactose also does not conduct electricity. Try the starch next. Take the electrodes, place it in the solution. Light bulb remains off. So the starch does not conduct. Electricity. Go to the right side. We start off with calcium chloride, CaCl2, light bulb in solution, and the light bulb does go on. So calcium chloride does conduct electricity. I'm just going to put conducts. Potassium chloride is next, KCl. Take the electrode, place it in solution. The light bulb goes on. So the potassium chloride also does conduct electricity. So we'll put conducts. Last but not least, the copper chloride, blue solution. Put the electrodes in, the light bulb goes on. It does conduct electricity. Conducts. Here we have the results from the melt test. Here, in the top left corner, we have sucrose. Not only did the sucrose melt, but it is boiling. The second one here, top middle, we have the lactose. The lactose also melted. Top right, we have the starch. The starch did not melt. Bottom left, we have the calcium chloride. It did not melt. In the bottom middle, we have the potassium chloride, did not melt. And here in the bottom right, we have copper 2 chloride. It burned to turn brown and went from green to brown, but it did not melt. So recap, sucrose, melted and boiled. Lactose, melted. Starch, did not melt. Calcium chloride, did not melt. Potassium chloride, did not melt. And copper 2 chloride also did not melt. Let's write our results from the melt test. Sucrose did in fact melt. So I'm going to write did melt. Lactose also melted. So I'm going to put did melt. Starch did not melt. Calcium chloride did not melt. Potassium chloride did not melt. And copper 2 chloride did not melt. Next, let's see if each substance dissolved in water. First up is the sucrose. If you look, you could see in the middle the sucrose has piled up on the bottom. You can kind of see the granules on the bottom. It's a little bit hard to see, but the water is clear and you could see the sucrose on the bottom. So sucrose did not dissolve. Next, lactose. This one's a little bit easier to see. Water's clear and you can see the lactose in the center of the beaker on the bottom. So lactose also did not dissolve. Starch is a little bit trickier. You can see that the water is cloudy, but there's also a lot of starch at the bottom of the beaker. So for this one, we'll say it dissolved, but it did not fully dissolve. There's still a lot of starch sitting there on the bottom of the beaker. Now for calcium chloride. Calcium chloride, it's very cloudy, and there are no calcium chloride pellets on the bottom. So this did fully dissolve. Calcium chloride, fully dissolved. Potassium chloride is next. You can see little bubbles in there. But this is a homogeneous mixture. It all looks uniform. I do not see any potassium chloride sitting on the bottom. And last but not least, we have copper 2 chloride. So potassium chloride did dissolve in water. Last but not least, calcium 2 chloride. Got this blue color. Once again, you see some bubbles in there, but there are no copper 2 chloride flakes on the bottom. So copper 2 chloride also dissolved in water. So recap, sucrose did not dissolve. Lactose did not dissolve. We're going to say that starch did dissolve, but not well. Calcium chloride did dissolve. Potassium chloride did dissolve. And copper 2 chloride definitely dissolved in water. Now let's record our results from the dissolve in water test. Sucrose did not dissolve. Lactose also did not dissolve. Starch dissolved. Calcium chloride also dissolved. Potassium chloride dissolved. And copper 2 chloride dissolved. Finally, let's create a physical description of each of the substances. First is sucrose. Sucrose is table sugar. So we could see that sucrose is white and granular. It's grainy and the color is white. Let's say white and grainy, white crystals. That is sucrose. Lactose is more powdery. It's like a white, fine powder. So for lactose, we could put white, fine powder. Starch. Starch is a little bit more granular than lactose, but less granular than sucrose. So we could also put white crystals for the starch as well. Next, for calcium chloride, we could say they're white pellets or white fragments. White pellets work. Let's put white pellets. Potassium chloride, we have, once again, white crystals. And last but not least, for copper chloride, we have blue-green flakes. Blue-green flakes. And finally, let's recap the description of all 6 substances. First one, sucrose. We said it was white and granular. Or you could say white crystals. The second one, lactose, was a white, fine powder. white fine powder. And starch, we also said, was white granules or crystals. CaCl2, we said were white pellets or fragments. KCl was also white crystals or white granules. And finally, copper 2 chloride was blue, green flakes. Thank you for joining Mr. Alvarez's virtual chemistry laboratory. Today we covered the chemical bonding layer. Thank you again for joining us. I hope you learned something today. Please join us again soon.